So yeah, the question is, how was that for you, saluting each line? So think just for one moment. Did you feel reverence and devotion? Did you feel episode? Or maybe you thought, oh, I've just settled down in the dance, I don't want to have to stand up again. Or maybe you thought, well, I don't really like this sort of thing, but I'm going to give it a go. Or you may even be somebody who does it quite regularly and just did it automatically. Any of those responses honestly are allowed, absolutely fine, because this is what we're exploring tonight, which is our relationship to reverence and devotion. So these 3 short talks are part of a Sangha night theme on the White Lotus Sutra, which is one of the most extravagant Mahayana sutras, full of rich imagery, symbols and stories. And what we've been trying to do is to better understand what this might mean for how we live our lives as Buddhists. White Lotus Sutra is pointing to the Bodhisattva ideal about looking beyond just pursuing our own individual enlightenment to actually looking at seeking the liberation of all beings. So it's pointing to something huge, something big. Last week, Vimaladasa gave a wonderful talk on the Bodhisattva on his knees, introducing us to reverence, introducing us to how we respond to something higher, something deeper, something beyond. There's all sorts of ways of putting it. And also, which I really liked, was especially feeling reverence towards the potential of Buddhahood in all beings. And Vimaladasa shared his own feelings towards reverence, which were complicated, because reverence and devotion, like everything else, is conditioned. It will depend on conditions. So in our society, outwardly expressing genuine reverence and devotion is something which is often sort of frowned upon. It's at best seen as a weakness and often sort of dismissed. Indeed, it's widely mocked sometimes, like a football fan bowing down to one of their great football heroes and saying, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. It's a sort of, perhaps that's quite healthy, really. Perhaps that's quite a good thing, because as Vimaladasa warned us last week, the path of surrender can leave us open to exploitation, and has been associated with religious fanaticism, political fanaticism, and so on, where you're required to express reverence and devotion. So it's a good idea in the sense to perhaps have a healthy, in some senses, a healthy disrespect. But I think more commonly in this country, outward expressions of reverence are just seen as just weird, just a bit weird. It was absolutely clear in the Vimaladasa Sutra, the Buddha himself was a worshipping Buddha. You might say, well, who could he worship? Who could the Buddha worship? Well, the Buddha said in the Sutta, to live without reverence is to be unhappy. But what Brahman or contemplative can I be a disciple of, looking up to, revering and obeying? Because, it goes on to say, there's no one, in a sense, there's nobody more perfected in meditation or in ethics or wisdom. I mean, he was the Buddha, let's face it. So the Buddha goes on to say, so I shall look up to and obey the Dharma. I will become a true disciple of the Dharma, looking up to, revering and obeying it. So what does he mean by the Dharma? Could think that means the teaching. Well, that would be a bit odd if he was revering without teaching. No, what the use of the word Dharma here means reality. It means the truth of reality, the truth of the way things are, as he experienced and as he continued to experience after his enlightenment. Also, there's an interesting thing here that the Buddha is saying, which is that to live without reverence is to be unhappy. And Sangha, our founder, said that it's only natural to worship something that you look up to. And indeed, worshipping devotion is deeply rooted in our psyche. It's a part of how we're made. And without it, we are actually quite bereft, quite rudderless. So how do we Of course, how we express reverence, respect, is not straightforward. So just take bowing and do a little salutation. And in that act, we're sort of engaging our heart mind. We're engaging our mind, but also our emotions, our sort of volition. We're often engaged with speech when we do these things, but also importantly, we're bowing with our physical body. And it's interesting, when you watch somebody talking about something that matters to them, they're doing this. 2 weeks ago, I was listening to another set of short talks, and I was watching it from home on a YouTube video, and there was no sound. There was no sound for Amla Siddhi when he got up to talk. But boy, could you get a sense of what he was saying, because it was fantastic. It was just, because his whole body was engaged with it. So, giving physical expression to how we move really, really elemental. So anyway, there's many ways, many different examples of reverence, many different practices, making offerings, bowing, chanting, pujas, prostration. There's many, many different practices. And I can't, or nobody can really tell you what reverence is. It's only something you can experience. And nor can somebody really tell you how to express it, because that is a very personal thing. We all have our own relationship to reverence. So that's why we've asked 3 people from the Sangha to talk about their own personal relationship to reverence and devotion, and how they've worked with it, and perhaps how it's changed over time. So we've got 3 speakers. We've got Jim, T, and then with myself. I'll just introduce T now, rather than she's going to get up and speak. But T will be very well known to many of you. She's a real stalwart in the office, brings all her creative, caring energies to all that she does. So, I'm really looking forward to what she's going to be talking about in relation to reverence. And Jim, literally at the last minute, last night was asked if he'd step in for Liz, who unfortunately couldn't come. And look at him, what a hero, he's here. You just had a day to prepare all this. So again, I'm really, really, really grateful to you both for stepping in like this. So yeah, thank you. 6:30. Yeah, that limp wasn't part of the act. It's not going to be like Willy Wonka. I'm not going to do a forward somersault and carry on. So yeah, I will be holding onto this podium for dear life as well. And I do tend to talk with my hands. So if I start to fall over, you can catch me. That'd be great. So I was asked to give this talk quite late last night. Let's just get that out there first. So, any disappointment? But I was thinking about, when we're talking about devotion, reverence, and in a lot of my talks, and especially for the people here who know me well, will know that I talk all the time about lighthouses, and I always mention it. And I thought I can't do that this time because I always talk about it, but then I was rooting through my bag, and my partner, bless her, had put hidden a card in there that had a lighthouse on it. So how can I not mention lighthouses after that's happened today? It was a sign. And for as long as I can remember, I've loved lighthouses ever since I was very young. There's like a profound integrity to them. They stand on the edge of the world, solitary, steadfast. They perform a single vital task, and I make it sound like they might be alive, and to me, they very much feel that way. Totemism is the belief that a personal symbol gives inspiration, insight. For thousands upon thousands of years, humans have used totems as a way of expressing their beliefs and their devotion and their reverence.
And that is what a lighthouse is to me. But a lighthouse doesn't ask for belief or worship. They simply turn, cast the light, and offer a way home. And for a long time, I felt like I didn't have a home, especially not one that I could be led back to. I mean, spiritually speaking, of course, I did tend to remember where I lived. But I did used to leave my house keys a lot. I used to drag my dad up the wall. So, yeah. But spiritually, yeah, I really didn't think I belonged anywhere. And later on, as I did find Buddhism and things came around, I held this love for the lighthouse alongside a skepticism of what became the rituals of Buddhism, my chosen path of Buddhism. And it was very difficult for me to reconcile the two. The lighthouse to me it's a practical thing. It's rooted, touchable, literally touchable. And Buddhist rituals felt, and I struggled to come up with a word for this, but superstitious is the best one I could come up with. It might not be the correct word, but that's kind of how it felt to me. But head, heart, never the twain shall meet. And that was kind of how I did Buddhism for quite a while. I mean, many years ago, before I became a Buddhist, I remember standing outside the doors to, I maybe pronounce this wrong, Gwinsa Temple in Hong Kong. And the monks in full robes, it's a beautiful shrine, just gold everywhere. And they came in, they chanted mantras, and it's a kind of, I'll have to ask Sangha about this, but it's kind of like an off-key sound to it. And it seemed to vibrate right down to my very bones. And the sound of the monks chanting, that deep, that kind of resonant drone, is hypnotic. But to my very Western mind at the time, I didn't understand it. And I'm quite, upfront with that. It felt like a locked room that I just couldn't get in. Like I had to have some kind of secret code. And my mind, the part of me that's drawn to Buddhism, or used to be drawn to this kind of elegant logic that Buddhism has, kind of stood at a distance from it, looking into this room, analysing it, judging, and ultimately, if I remember rightly, dismissing it. It felt like a performance, not like an act of reverence to me. And I often wondered, how could this path of Buddhism, it teaches self-reliance, it involves bowing to a statue. How can it teach non-attachment while encouraging offerings of incense and flowers and candles? That to me feels very much like a contradiction, or at least it used to. My love for the lighthouse, the clear rational beacon, that this chanting, this bowing and all the kind of ritual, it just seemed like fog to me. My first proper ritual I experienced here was at the hustings. I don't know if you've not been to that, it's a great day, come along. But I was only 3 weeks into the intro course at the time, and I wanted to experience it all, because I'd already fallen in love with Buddhism, and especially with coming here. And I wouldn't change it for the world now, but it might not have been the best idea I ever had to come along with no context, with no idea what was going on. And please don't take this the wrong way for anybody who comes along. Does some great things at the hustings, but it felt to me a little bit like C of E, a bit like Church of England from when I was at Sunday school. And I kind of half expected a damn charity to come token out there with guitar and sing like the Buddhist version of Kumbaya. Luckily that didn't happen, but I've got perhaps some baggage from my youth at Sunday school. And I just couldn't once again understand this kind of making offerings to the shrine, bowing. It just really didn't make much sense to me. On my first Sangha retreat, I kind of realised I was looking at it all wrong. I don't know what particular part of the sevenfold puja it was, or even why, but it was like I felt a release of tension, almost like somebody had, untightened my spiritual cambell. I don't know anything about cars, so I'm not sure if I use that metaphor right or not, but you know what I mean. I just all of a sudden I felt like a release. And the ritual changed. I was kind of seeing it as a dogmatic worship when I really should have been seeing it as part of my practice. The practical and the superstitious, all of a sudden, they weren't fighting against each other. They kind of melded. Both are as useful as the other. One does not have precedence over the other. And I could picture it in my head all of a sudden, this kind of repetitive turning of the lights, like a lighthouse. The rhythmic call of the foghorn. And this is the lighthouse devotion. It's a ritual performed not for a distant God, but for those lost in the storm. And what is the mind if not a stormy sea of thoughts? It's anxieties and distractions, but you all know what I mean by that. So suddenly this memory of the monks in Hong Kong, it shifted. So the chant was not a plea to a distant god, but a beacon. It was the sound of that foghorn cutting through the spiritual fog. The deep continuous vibration that I felt on that day was a tool to steady the mind and to provide an anchor, to use the metaphor again, in the turbulent waters of moment-to-moment existence. The devotion necessarily wasn't to, as I say, an external deity, but to the internal task of creating clarity, something internal rather than external. And there it was, I could kind of glimpse it, foggy in the distance with a way to go yet, but I could see it was there, it was home. So with this new lens, pun intended, I've just realised, the lighthouse lens, all the other rituals that kind of began to make sense, all seemed to fall into place. And they became my own personal lighthouses, the objects on my small altar at the time. It's much bigger now, but they became my totems. And for me, a totem, a ritual or an act of devotion, isn't what it represents. It's a powerful symbol, a focal point that connects me to a deeper truth. And that's what a lighthouse is to me. It's not just a lighthouse. It's a representation of my ideals, exactly like a Bodhisattva. My Buddha statue is not a god. It is a totem for the potential of awakening that exists within me. It is the solid stone structure of the lighthouse, a reminder of the steadfastness I'm trying to cultivate. We often light candles, and for me, the candle is a light. It's a ritual of illumination, a devotion to seeing things clearly. It's the steady flashing of the lighthouse at night, guiding me home. The single flower offered to the shrine, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's also transient. It's a totem for me of impermanence, and it's a daily practice in accepting the grace of letting go. It's also the sudden appearance and disappearance of the storm at sea, weathered by the strong roots of the lighthouse. And for me now, thankfully, these are not empty gestures. They're physical acts that train my heart and mind. Bowing is no longer an act of submission. It's the practice of humility and letting the ego touch the ground. My relationship with ritual is no longer one of separation, but of deep gratitude, and I really mean that. These expressions of devotion are my lighthouses, and my totems and rituals and the tools that I use to keep the lighthouses shining. They're the steady, reliable structures that can help me navigate my own inner landscape. The chanting, the bowing, simple offering of a flower, lighting of a candle, they're my way of turning the light, of sounding the foghorn, of sending a clear, steady message and signal into the storm. My devotion is the quiet, constant, and utterly essential work of coming home.
I'm just going to say quickly that the team said I could do a talk so long as I look up. And it's the perfect talk to look up to, isn't it? So I know what I'm saying, but I don't know how, so I'm probably going to run over. We started. So I'm going to start with last week's talk and taking a quote from Vimaladasa, word for word, because I'll just start with that first. So self-development is an appropriate place to be for a while. And if and when you take it to its conclusion, it does bring you to your knees. And from there, you can choose to bow, surrender, discover, or you can choose not to. So like before his talk, I was thinking on this topic because I knew it was on reverence, and I was thinking, how do you make reverence and devotion? Like what is that like? And as I was reflecting on that, I noticed a pattern where I was constantly being broken down and then rebuilt again. And for me, reverence and devotion isn't something that you cultivate, you don't make it. It's a quality that your being is perfumed with as a result of being deconstructed and allowing something else to rebuild you. So I'm going to show you an example of my own drama, actually, used through the Dharma jewel, and my approach to mitra study and how that broke me down and then had to rebuild myself. And as a result of that, it's my approach is more perfumed with reverence and devotion. So at Sangha night, when I first started coming after the intro course, I had a very neurodivergent, intense approach to taking notes, and I used to use bonkers mind maps. And if I looked at how I approached study, it's like I copied and pasted my capitalist university mind frame, and I just plonked it on top of Dharma study. And I was very thorough, I was a perfectionist, I was neurotic, I had this conditioning that was like kind of passed on to me from my family, which was like a communist, working really hardness. And that had, I've literally written, and that had consequences, my friends. My study group formed in 2020, and we only saw each other in person 4 times before we went on Zoom. And I lost my job a week before furlough, so I literally didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And there was all the conditions, so I wanted to explain the conditioning of what was around me at the time that I got into my drama. One was just this existential, not knowing what I'm going to do with the rest of my life-ness, which was a thing. And there was this contrast of everything slowing down, everything being calmer, and they were 2 quite different like energies almost. And in my study, because I didn't have much to do, I took my study really seriously, and I got a bit neurotic. So I'd take the questions at the end each week, and I'd be typing like Mad Maxim on the keyboard. And I thought I was doing something healthy, like I thought I was going for refuge to the Dharma jewel, and I thought it was skillful. But what happened was that I had a very strong overreaction, and I went into quite a nihilistic place, and my being, and it wasn't very rational, but it sort of went to a place where my ego got the sense that it was on its way out. And it was a very visceral, kind of scary response. And I don't want to put people off study. I don't want to make them worry that that's what's happening to them. There was a lot of conditions at play that led me to get to that. And so I had a few weeks off study, and then like the week I was supposed to go back, I remember really reading those first 3 lines of Dharma, and all of them felt like my ego's on its way out, and I just couldn't go near the Dharma. I literally couldn't study. So I left my group, and I didn't go back for 2 years. And in that time, I went into a deep process of, I felt very deeply humbled by the Dharma, actually. And I went into a long phase of processing, which was beyond the rational. And I started to almost start reprogramming in a deeper, wider way. And if I was to say what my perception of the Dharma was, I really felt the power of it, and the vastness of it, and the complexity, awe, and I also felt my sense of naivety. And I think what happened was, when I got into that state, is that there wasn't enough metta, which is why the metta involvement is really important. And I'm not saying, I kept getting that theme in my practice, where I'd get to places and I knew there wasn't enough metta. So I have a better understanding now of what the Dharma is, but at the time I didn't. So it was easier to say 2 years ago what the Dharma isn't, but I didn't know what it was. So I'm going through this process of processing. Don't quite know what the Dharma is, but I know it wasn't through how I was feeling. It wasn't learning lists or information. It wasn't a self-help guide. It wasn't a life coaching program. It wasn't an alternative to therapy or creative writing workshop. And it wasn't just words, And back then, I was learning the lessons of how to approach it, and it demanded a certain amount of respect, actually, and it was asking me to handle it with a deeper sense of care and respect. Then I'm going to talk about my return journey. How did I get back into studying again? And Padma Vajra was leading a volunteering study morning, and I had an unusual check-in where I said, I'm scared of the Dharma, and I'm worried about doing this. And I really remember picking the pen up and writing that first note. It was a real big deal. And on the tea break, Padma Vajra came up to me in the corridor, and he just touched me on the back. And he said, are you okay? And I knew from his gesture that he knew exactly where I was or something. I didn't feel silly, for being honest, about how I checked in. And in between sort of that processing time and starting my new group, I had this experience of constantly being broken down and building up again in all areas of my practice. So it's like Martha and Vimaladasa, build the tower again, build the tower again, build the tower again. So when I came to doing my second study group, and my consciousness was different, and I approached it completely differently. And Ananta Kirti encouraged me to talk to Sangha to get back into a study group again, and I'm really grateful she did that, because I don't know how long it would take me on my own. And in my new study group now, I'm like far less concerned with personal gain, and I don't reflect too heavily. I have more faith that just from the Dharma sort of raining on me, it's just doing something. And I'm far more interested in the women in my group. I really revere them, I love listening to them, and I love what them transforming their lives. Like, loads of them are mothers, and I just think, like, you're incredible. You're literally incredible. That's a lot more enjoyable for me now. And we generate this kind of atmosphere together when we're studying. I just wouldn't be able to cultivate studying on my own. And I'm in awe of that. Like, sometimes we always make a joke, like, that we get to the shoe stand and we can't even remember what we talked about, but we're energized, And Paranita as well, I have a huge respect. She comes every Thursday, she doesn't get paid for it. And she just sets this thing up for us, these conditions. Thank you. And, if I'm at Sangha night and I see she's looking for a seat to eat, I get up and I offer her my seat. If I'm here on Women's Mitra morning and she needs a piece of paper to do the exercise, she gets my piece of paper and I go get another one. That kind of reverence is good for me, she is a gate to the Dharma for me, and it's very different to how I approached it the first time. So I'm just going to finish by saying that out of all of this, right effort is to, I've learned that right effort is to be taken seriously. It's not just a sub-bit of the Eight Noble Eightfold Path. It's almost like I'm trying to balance Padmasambhava's urgency with Manjughosha's wise gentleness. And this subtle, nuanced balance is beautiful in itself. That's also something to revere, watching me kind of carve that out and in my being, refining. And now I kind of know that the Dharma is a map, really, and it leads to the complete, total purification of my whole being. And the beauty of that is majestic for me. And I'm looking forward to revering that more deeply and having a deeper connection to that. So that's me.
It's just a real example of how personal our relationship is to Reverence and Devotion. So I'm going to give a little bit of a talk about my personal experience, which I've sort of entitled something like Wallflower to Full Prostration. So I was initially pretty awkward around expressions of reverence. I was brought up in loosely speaking, nonconformist Protestant household where, outward expressions of anything really were pretty rare. I love my parents dearly, by the way. But, you get the picture, suburban English sort of household. So in addition, I'm quite, I consider myself, perhaps less so these days, quite introverted. At the parties, I was the wallflower, not quite sure how to join in. That's what I'm like. I don't want to cause fuss. I don't want to risk disapproval, So that was the sort of person I was. When I came into this centre about 20 or so years ago, I felt a very strong connection to the place and the people, really strong connection. And I felt like I'd arrived home. But I felt in a way I wasn't able to express it. I mean, I was interested in small pieces of ritual, but I didn't really feel engaged, didn't really feel sort of part of it. And on a retreat, my first retreat, somebody did something which I'm not sure they were allowed to do, but anyway, they prostrated in front of the shrine and just lay there like this for a long period. And I just thought, oh my God, what's that about? I just couldn't figure, it all seemed a bit sort of pretentious. There's something a bit weird about it. I just didn't really connect with it. So I think cultural views undoubtedly strongly contribute to our response to ritual. Certainly when I think about my former colleagues, I'm retired now, my former colleagues, I mean, to them, things like bowing, holding hands, prostrating, all that sort of thing is just weird, it's just not allowed, it's just not part of the secular sort of world that they're living, And much of my family probably would think much the same. But that's very weird 21st century English sort of view of the world. If I'd been brought up in a different culture, maybe in India or Latin America, I could well have a very different attitude to these things. It's just our country. So how did I approach this? Well, initially I started bowing and just noticing what happened. My friends and work colleagues weren't here, so it was safe. There was nobody who could sort of watch me doing, whatever it was. So it was okay. And then making offerings, again, a similar sort of process. I'll just try it. I'll just see what it's like. And becoming a mitra sort of did break the glass ceiling a bit. And it's hard to remember, but just over a month ago, 5 people became mitras in the ceremony, and I was sat there watching them making the 3 offerings of a candle, a flower, and incense. And I was quite moved because suddenly I really realised the significance of that. What I really want to talk about, though, is something about the power of reverence and devotion, at least in my life. A few years after coming along to the States, I asked ordination, as they say. So I entered the sort of process of training, which isn't what it sounds like. It's quite hard to describe, very personal to your own life. I mean, there are some things you do, but a lot of it's about you and what your stuff, what you're sorting out. But one of the key sort of defining practice when you start training, is a devotional practice called going for refuge and prostration practice. Now, prostration is something we have talked a bit about in this thing. I mean, it's a big thing in the White Lotus Sutra. People are prostrating all over the place. It's just completely standard practice in the White Lotus Sutra, okay? But we have our own sort of version of it, and it's incorporated into a practice where essentially you visualize or get a sense of the refuge tree. And I think I wasn't pointed through before, but that's the refuge tree, which represents our lineage, if you like, our lineage. And in the middle, you can see we have the Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha is the biggest figure, the centre of our tradition, which is what we expect. You have other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas representing the sort of qualities that we look up to. There are also past teachers in various traditions. There are also the teachers who Sangha took initiations from, and so on, who we pay respect to. So, we visualize this in the practice. We visualize it, or get a sense of being with those figures. And also, we imagine all beings are with us, okay? And then we prostrate for 10 to 15 minutes, that sort of time, okay? It's a practice that fully involves your body as well as speech and mind. It's very, very absorbing. And I took it up as a practice regularly here, and a few of us would do it here in the morning before work. It's one of those practices, it's a technique thing. You often use gloves, okay, woolen gloves to help with the glide. It's why we haven't done it. And sometimes I'd forget my gloves. And I thought, what am I going to use? Oh yeah, I'll use my socks. So I put my socks in my hands. And I thought, well, if my work colleagues could see me now, what would they think? What on earth has got into that? Crazy. What's got into it? But yeah, it became a really important practice for me. I did it over many years. And in many ways, I thought for that period it was my main practice. And it was a time when I was going through a very difficult time. I was splitting up. I was in the process of divorce. And it threw up all sorts of difficult things about me. You know, I had to reflect on me and my behaviour, how I'd been. I had to sort of face up to the remorse. And also a sense of, it's almost like I didn't know what to do. You know, it was like overwhelming. And the thing about a practice like that, frustration practice, is that you just surrender. You just kind of let go as best you can of what you thought you were. You just let go of that. And that practice over time really, really helped me, I think, engage with what was a difficult time for me and my partner. I think it helped me with remorse, it helped me make amends. It was a really key element. Because what I found is that regular meditation, in a way, was great, but it really wasn't working. Whereas frustration, going through refuge and frustration practice, to borrow a phrase, sort of reached the parts that other practices have. And it changed me. Along with great friends supporting me. So, anyway, I wanted to incorporate this in Vimaladasa's talk last week, just to show that it embodies all three myths. Because in a practice like that, or any sort of devotional practice, you are in a way surrendering to the Buddha, to the Buddhist and Bodhisattvas, surrendering to something higher, which both T and Jim have been expressing as well. At the same time, in this practice, you're imagining all beings. You may think, well, that's a bit weird. All beings, including your mother, your father, you know, just billions of people. But of course, what you're doing there is you're acknowledging the potential for Buddhahood of all beings. It's not just you doing it, doing your little practice. You know, Buddhist. It's like everybody doing it, because everybody can become a Buddha. And that's really, really important. But I think most important for me, it was a way of me saying to myself repeatedly that I can change. It helped me cultivate a faith in a way, in part of self-development. So it's a practice that does unite the myths of self-surrender, development, and discovery, which Vimaladasa so eloquently described last week. Sangha said about devotional practices more generally, it helps to enlist the cooperation of unconscious energies in growth and development. Anyway, I realise I've taken reverence to quite a high level here. We talked about practice that really isn't for everybody, and is a practice which is taken up by people training coordination. So it's people who train coordination or all the members. And there are many other ways of practicing, bowing, saluting, making offerings, and so forth. And I just wanted to say that they're all equally powerful. Okay, and the reason I'm saying that is because the Buddha said so in the White Lotus Sutra. So I'm going to close with the words of the Buddha on the subject. Even anyone who, with distracted mind, has offered just a single flower, or show faith and respect by folding their hands in reverence, or just by slightly bowing their heads, or even just once chanting Namo Buddhaya, they in good time shall see countless Buddhas enter the great way, bring countless beings to liberation, and pass into the